Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. We are starting up again for the weekend with watches, and everything you see here is for sale. Reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Everything is in the description box below with names, references, and when available, prices. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com to buy or trade. And if you want to sell, we are stocking up for the holidays, but this is the home stretch. We will not be adding to our holiday inventory forever. For now, we're paying our highest prices of the year. This is the time. One watch or a whole collection with no upper limit on value paid. We are buying. And once again, tmosso at thewatchbox.com to make it happen. Okay, this is going to be a fun show. It's a fairly heavy program, and we're going to start out with fan favorites, Rolex and the Daytona. And not just any Daytona, but a particularly warm and engaging gold ceramic on Oysterflex. Now, we first saw these Oysterflex precious metal Daytonas at Baselworld 2017. SIHH and Baselworld are both dead now. But back in the day, Rolex was, along with Patek Philippe, one of the two anchors of Baselworld, and a new Daytona, a new sub, or a new GMT would always be a headlining piece of news. And so it was. Yellow gold, white gold, and rose gold. It was the rose that proved by far to be the warmest, as well as the best match for a broad range of skin tones. It's also probably the most handsome complement and contrast with the black of the bezel and the black of the strap. And you have a nice contrast, not just between the rose gold and the strap here, but also between the gold and the black of the dial and the matte of the strap and the polish of the black ceramic and black lacquered dial. So this is a dramatic watch on many levels. The registers themselves explode from the dial base, and at only 12.2 millimeters thick, this is a nice, thin, wearable, and comfortable watch. Just about any wrist size can wear it, and if you're new to these programs, my wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. 3-day power reserve, 100-meter water resistance, chronometer-certified, plenty of lume. It has the Oysterflex strap bracelet, which I call a bracelet on account of the titanium alloy band that runs through it, so you can never tear it straight through or cut it to length. So there's several different options available for sizing. There's also easy link and 3 divots for relocating the anchoring point of the bracelet inside the clasp. Easy link is 5 millimeters in, 5 millimeters out. And on the bottom of the strap, there's a bellows system that ensures you just need to get close with sizing. It will cinch down and really hold, while also creating an air pocket to better vent your wrist on a hot day. As ever with the Daytona in the modern era, caliber 4130 inside, vertical clutch, column wheel, chronometer certified, anti-magnetic, and very shock tolerant. Of course, this is a movement built by Rolex, in a case built by Rolex, on a strap built by Rolex, Rolex even creating its own gold. This is called Everose. It's red gold, not pink, not rose, and it stays that red because of the higher platinum content. It is red because of the higher copper content, so a glorious watch that is all Rolex, and possibly the warmest and most versatile appearing of the Oysterflex precious metal Daytonas. Now, jumping back to 2001, right here we have a K series. Rolex Explorer II. This is from the 40 millimeter era, 16570, and you can see we're in the era of solid end link bracelets, but we still have strap tool holes in the lugs at this time. Now, the watch, of course, does have hollow center links. This is an old school Rolex. The timepiece, though, showing some evidence of the Rolex transition from the 90s through the early 2000s, and that it does feature a Luminova dial, as post-1998 Rolexes do, and it features that solid end-link bracelet as Rolex began to phase out hollow links. The timepiece wears differently than the current 42mm, not just because it's 2 millimeters smaller, but because it's shorter across the wrist, and it also doesn't feel as blockish. The bigger watch feels more like a cushion case, whereas this watch wears more like a round case, so it's 40 millimeters true. Inside the caliber is an automatic winder, a chronometer, true dual time with a 24-hour hand in red lacquer and then local hours on a black lacquered dial. This timepiece, of course, featuring all the Rolex refinements, including free-sprung balance architecture, a full balance bridge, overcoil hairspring, chronometer certification, and a very smooth Teflon reversing wheel system with bidirectional winding. So unlike many watches, you really can't hear or feel the winding process in a Rolex. Now, the timepiece, of course, has those two independently settable time zones, so you could set that local hour hand separately, even as the watch continues to keep time. The Explorer II debuted back in 1971, and originally it was designed to be a watch for cave and subterranean explorers, the idea being to give you a clear idea of day and night over 24 hours. when you could not see the sun shining. So the idea is to let you know whether you're looking at, for example, 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. in the day. 100 meters water resistant, sapphire crystal. This watch is still new enough that it can be worn as intended as a sports watch. Now we're going to jump into the world of the ultra haute de gamme, and we're going to talk about a model first seen in 2008. This is special even by the standards of a brand that makes at most 950 watches a year. The FP Journe Repetition Souveraine. Stainless steel and 40 millimeters. This timepiece was designed to impress. First, you can see it's different. One of the strikers of the minute repeater system, black polished on the dial, easily legible on a dial base that is entirely blueprinted to let you know that this is not a standard model in the Souveraine collection. This is something approaching Geneva aristocracy. Now, mechanically, it is a repeater system welded to the 1304 movement that is the base in the chronometer-certified. So all of the accuracy and mechanics inherent in the CS present in this watch, with the addition of a chiming system that includes one patent for the ultra-compact rack and snail that reads the time for the repeater, and then a second patent for the scythe-like gongs. So they're not ring gongs, they are scythe-like. Imagine a scythe on a farm. That's exactly what it looks like. When you turn the watch over, you can see this steel case features a rose gold movement still, and the architecture is identical to the 1304 on the CS. You can see this is 1408, 14 French lean, and you can see that 08 is the year work started. Now, the movement, of course, has two barrels, a 56-hour power reserve, a 21.6 beat rate, a free-sprung architecture. It is 6-position adjusted, one more than a standard chronometer adjustment. And then you can see there is a centrifugal governor on the reverse side. Now, this watch is steel for a reason. It's not very dense compared to precious metals, so it has a brighter sound to it, a better ring, and a longer sustain. Let's set this minute repeater to 12:59, and if I can get close, you're going to hear the sound of a minute repeater at max. It will chime the hours, the quarters after the hour in a double chime, and then it will chime the minutes after the final quarter. So that is the longest chiming sequence. Let's see if I got far enough in there. Okay, we'll find out. This is as long as you can get a repeater to chime. Tough stuff, and I'll be honest, this is designed to be an everyday minute repeater. In stainless steel with a robust base movement, FP Journe constructed this watch to be a daily companion, not an occasional curiosity. Most minute repeaters are fairly fragile. This one, as with all Journe watches, is designed for daily use. It's only 8.7 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters in diameter, and 48 millimeters lug to lug with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. When you throw it on the wrist, it's quite discreet. Many minute repeaters, tourbillon, perpetual calendar, high complications, tend to be bombastic and oversized, and this watch is none of that. Graceful, traditional, this is old school FP Journe, reflecting his original philosophy of discretion, moderate size, and thin cases. This timepiece is all of the above. It also includes a full deployment clasp in steel, which is an exceptionally uncommon accessory on Journe watches. We're also going to take a look at a model that is not just an FP Journe boutique exclusive, but in order to buy from the Black Label series, you must previously have purchased a new FP Journe watch. Black Label means that level of exclusivity, but also the fact that only 2 examples of any given model can be made Black Label in a single year. Add a 40 millimeter platinum case and a black center dial, and you get the Quantième Perpétuel Black Label. The QP is an impressive watch, and as you can see, it has the clover dial that was discontinued for this year, so there will be no more black labels in this fashion. The clover frame is a black polished piece of steel that surrounds the center dial, and then the watch, of course, in platinum with the black dial center, that is the look exclusive to the Black Label. When you turn it over, it's an impressive machine. Technically, accurate for 120 hours. The absolute power reserve of this movement is almost 7 days at 160 hours. Red gold bridges, red gold plates, and a 22-carat mass that's cut on a rose lathe to create this grand doge, or barleycorn pattern. There's circular Côte de Genève on the bridges. Anglage is getting better and better on Journe watches as it's starting to look more and more mirrored and less machined. The screw heads are all black polished, as are the locating pegs that help to locate the bridges on the base plate, and then there's engine turning on the base plate itself. Rolling back to the dial, what's fun about this perpetual calendar is that it's really easy to set. Everything can be set using a quick set mechanism in the crown, with the exception of the month. Now, if you look at the month, you can see that there is a hideaway trigger underneath the lug at 1 o'clock, and that can be used in order to set the month without resort to some sort of a tool. So there are no pusher adjuster dimples on this case that can mar the lines of a traditional QP. You're also not going to be tempted to use a pen or a pencil to set it, so there's no danger of damage to the mechanism. With a 160-hour power reserve, haute de gamme finish, precious metal inside and out, a user-friendly perpetual calendar, the most exclusive style of standard FP Journe watch, and of course the discontinued QP clover dial. This watch has a lot going for it, and in 40 millimeters, even my spindly little wrist can wear it well. Now, we've talked about a lot of big pieces. This is a big piece, but it's not a big piece with a big price. This is the Maestro Soltora Meta X, designed in Germany and built in Switzerland. It is like a dive watch in many regards because it does not have a constant running second. It is technically not a diver, but it has plenty of lume, a ceramic insert, and a rotating dive bezel, 200-meter water resistance, and the burly, strident, and striking stance of a dive watch on the wrist. Now, it is a jump hour, which means you get this wonderful dynamic on the dial as the time advances. Inside a Sellita SW200, which is an automatic that is very tough and properly suited to this kind of application. Maestro, known for its one-hand watches here, spreads its wings a little bit for a different look, a more complicated watch, and more utility. Now, if you look at the case itself, it's quite thoughtfully designed, with a tapered bevel on the lugs, a combination of polish and satin, lovely pointed horns for the crown guard. You can also see that the bezel is a captive construction like Breitling and Zinn use. So you have these little screws that fix the bezel to the case. So this is not a snap-on, snap-off bezel. It can't be easily knocked off like a Rolex, a Tag, or an Omega bezel can be. There is a ceramic insert, and it is a wonderfully convenient system. It's unidirectional rotating, very sharp. You can hear that detent, and it feels as good as it sounds. Line up the index with the minute hand. Now, just like a dive watch, you've got a 0 to 60-minute count-up timer. Taking a quick look at the case back, you can see the Maestro logo. There's satin finish outboard, polish ringing, and then a lovely media-blasted frosted center with raised, relieved, and polished Maestro logo and marquee. Simple, no-nonsense pin buckle, and a fascinating rubberized leather strap. It's clearly calfskin, but on the side as well as the top, it's been rubberized for better splash resistance and long-term durability. It's packed with a little bit of stuffing to give it volume, to give it some heft. And then you can see that the colors of the dial are recapped in the colors of the rubberized element of the strap. This is a watch I actually love, and I'm kind of thinking of buying it. So throw it on the wrist, and you can see it's got a lot of presence. It's a 43 millimeter watch, and it's about 51.4 millimeters lug to lug and 14.6 millimeters thick. So on the wrist, it's an imposing timepiece. Think Blancpain 50 fathoms, and you got about the right idea. The nice thing, though, is even though the lugs are broad, you can see how they're generously curved to wrap around the wrist. So I don't get the sense that this is awkwardly proportioned or flaring out over my wrist. I think it's actually a good match. I'd say down to 15 centimeters circumference, your wrist can probably wear this watch well. Now let's do a quick lume shot with some of these timepieces you've just seen, because I think when I describe this as a loomed watch, I really need to show, not tell. And now we're back with the Soltora Meta X. And this is just an awesome piece. You can see that gigantic loomed bezel pearl, but you can also see happily, in spite of the ceramic insert, Maestro has managed to build a bezel that is fully loomed 360 degrees, so it is even easier to read that hand against the bezel in the dark. Now, of course, you're going to only time relatively short intervals up to 1 hour, and predictably, the jumping hour needs to charge just like the rest of the dial. So if the hour does jump, you're going to lose the hour, but for swimming and diving purposes, that's less important because you're not going to be down that long. We are flying down the road here. And we are speaking of Longa. Actually, two wonderful pieces, both 39.9 millimeters. I think we'll start with the watch that came out chronologically first. A 200th anniversary birthday present to Longa and Glasuta, watchmaking hero, F.A. Longa. This, of course, is the 1815 F.A. Longa 200th anniversary in honey gold. Now, it's important to note just how different honey gold is from red, rose, or even pink gold. It's nothing like the intensity of Rolex Everose. It's much lighter. It could best be described as almost a combination between pink gold and yellow gold, with maybe a little bit of white thrown in. So it's a different look, but it's also more scratch resistant, which is practically wonderful. As precious metal watches can be scratch magnets, this one is designed to look different and also hold up better over time. Now, the timepiece is relatively slim at 10.3 millimeters thick. It's a 200-piece limited edition. My favorite feature of the watch is not actually the honey gold, though it's lush, but it's the dial, which is off-white. Think cream, think eggnog, a little bit eggshell perhaps, not just in the color, but also in the texture, which is finely grained and beautifully varnished. Turn the watch over and you can see the movement is what you expect from a Longa. L0511, manual wind, 72-hour power reserve, German silver bridges and plates, so that's a nickel copper zinc alloy with the golden hue coming from the copper. We have a freehand engraved balance cock, a black polished cap to the escape wheel, black polished case clamp screws, black polished swan's neck regulator. It does have hacking seconds, and note that there are both black polished and fired blue screws here, with the train as well as the barrel set in golden chaton held in place by blued screws. There's also mirrored anglage. There aren't too many edges to bridges here because of the 3/4 style plate. All of this is designed to evoke pocket watches of the 19th century, but you can see that the anglage that's there is beautiful, it is rich, it is mirrored, and it is not machined. Throw this watch on the wrist real quick. We'll take some wrist shots here and jump over to the 1815 annual calendar. This is a watch that wears well. Flat flush, compatible with a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. You can see from overhead it's nowhere near the edge of my wrist, and then this down the barrel shot showing a good advantage that even if your wrist is tiny, this watch is going to be a good match. Okay, the 1815 annual calendar. This is a model that I saw launched back in 2017, and this model in white gold is 39.9 millimeters, just like the F.A. Longa we just saw. It's also fairly thin, as they're comparable in thickness. This one's about 0.5 millimeter thicker, and the watch has a comprehensive annual calendar dial, which is made of sterling silver. So the case is white gold, the dial is sterling silver, the moon phase disc itself is made of white gold. So Longa using gold for its moon phase discs. You can see the hands at center are a lovely blued alpha style, and then we have sunken registers. You can split the dial down the center, and it has bilateral symmetry. Now, if you do fall behind a few days with the annual calendar, you can use the trigger over at 2 o'clock, and everything, including the moon phase, steps forward. So if you fall 5 days behind, you press it 5 times. Problem solved. There's a coaxial indicator for both the day and the date at 9 o'clock. You have your month, then you have your coaxial seconds and moon phase. Turn it all over, and you can see this one too is powered by a version of the L95 or L051 that we saw in the 1815 F.A. Longa. Technically speaking, it is very, very similar. They have the same power reserve, same architecture, same beat rate. The main differences, and you can see them, relate primarily to the ratchet wheel and the click, which is more or less cloaked on the 1815 F.A. Longa and more obviously visible, as well as finished with a solarization on the ratchet wheel of the L0513. So both cool watches, both emblematic of their maker, but if you want complication, a slight nod to the 1815 annual calendar, a calendar system that need be adjusted only once a year during the jump from February to March. Let's talk immortals in steel. Immortals in steel with a healthy dose of red. This, of course, is part of a fascinating class of sports and horological memorabilia that in the future will be remembered for the Olympics that never happened. Part of the Omega Tokyo 2020 collection. This is the Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch Tokyo 2020. There were several, 5 to be exact, in this collection, and The individual models, when not part of the collected series, were built in a running series of 2,020 pieces each. So 5 different versions, 2,020 pieces each, and then there were a couple that were matched serial number sets. This one is considered to be the most attractive of the 5 for 2 reasons. First, sticking with the steel construction and a muted, granular, almost media blasted profile on the dial gives the watch an upscale sheen. The red accents seem premium. It does have a sapphire crystal. It is a standard Moonwatch caliber inside, which means caliber 1861, manual wind, cam actuation with a lateral clutch, 21.6 beat rate, and a 48-hour power reserve. The dial looks like the granular platinum dials fitted to the gray side of the moon and prior versions of the Rolex Yachtmaster 116622. So this really does have an upscale look to it, and it has a lot of character, an ambiance of luxury and refinement about it. And it's very much a Moonwatch with all that entails, the legacy of NASA, space programs, frankly, collectors around the world, lore and legend, and it's probably the only Omega watch that, in terms of status and stature, actually stands toe-to-toe with icons like the Rolex Submariner, the Patek Philippe Nautilus, and the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. Unlike any of those, this was a watch originally designed to do a job and still used by NASA for that job. Add the Olympics that never happened, and you have an interesting class of collectible, a watch that is both fascinating from a watch collector standpoint as well as from the broader standpoint of sporting memorabilia, meaning this watch is doubly collectible. You can also see that the bracelet and the clasp on these Speedmasters has really improved over the years, as we now have all removable links fixed by screws. All links are solid and very hefty, and internally, even though it's not a dive watch, there's a push-button incremental sizing slider that you can use for fine-tuning the fit. All of this, you can see the clasp machined out of the solid, very secure. Like a vault, it feels like a diving clasp, and in fact, it is very similar to the clasps used on the Diver 300 meters. So this is a fantastic piece, and a little bit more wearable than a standard Moonwatch, just because it does have that sapphire crystal, no worry about scratching. All right, from IWC, you've got 2 iconic lines. You've got the pilot's watches and you've got the Portuguesers. And if you're a dress watch guy, you're going to be a Portugueser guy. If you're a sports watch guy, you're going to reach for the pilots. I prefer dress watches, and that's why I really like this IWC Portugueser Tribeca Film Festival limited edition of 100 pieces in steel, referenced 5001-26. It was for the 2013 edition of the Tribeca Film Festival. Now, I have to admit, although I'm sure that's a worthy occasion, I don't care that much about films. What I care about is watches, and this one is gorgeous. 42.2 millimeters in stainless steel. It features what IWC calls an ardoise dial, which means it is a slate gray sunburst metallic. You have 2 burgundy red counters that are sunken into the dial, applique indices, and Arabic numerals with center leaf hands. This is all recalling the original 1939 Portugueser reference 325, which was not just the first Portugueser, but really the first purpose-built, that is non-pocket watch conversion, wristwatch. The first purpose-built oversized wristwatch of 1939 was that first Portugueser, a wristwatch designed to be as accurate as a pocket watch and thus powered by an oversized pocket watch movement. Today, it remains an oversized watch, but a classical style, drawn from the same era of design that gave us the Patek Philippe reference 96, unofficially the first Calatrava. We have that same form-following function ethic with integrated lugs, just as you'll find on the Calatrava. Polished caseback, polished bezel with a concave to visually pair the mass, and a simple probus scafusia motto crown, as it's called. Now, the watch does include a number of refinements, including a 7-day automatic winding power reserve. For this 100-piece limited edition, there is a hacking seconds function, so you can stop the seconds and set precisely to a reference time. There is a quick set, so you can rapidly set the date if you can find the clutch position for the intermediate. Come on, Tim. We'll come back to that in a moment. Rolling over to the case back, you can see that the timepiece includes caliber 51011 and a little rose gold medallion. And this is where you get the Tribeca Film Festival co-branding, and it's discreet. Fortunately, it's not on the dial side. What you can also see is that the watch has a remarkably broad movement, as this movement, originally born in 2000 as the caliber 5000, was and remains one of the largest automatic winding calibers in the world. At 37 millimeters in diameter, the movement itself is bigger than a standard Rolex Datejust. It's free-sprung, adjusted in 5 positions, and it has an overcoil hairspring. It beats away at 21.6, and it uses ceramic pawls for the IWC Albert Peloton winding system that the company first introduced in the early 1950s. So the ceramic pawls actually helped to reduce the problem of dirt on the movement, which was a challenge on previous versions of the Peloton winding system. The timepiece does come with a full stainless steel deployant clasp, and the clasp itself is your insurance against droppage while donning or removing. It's also remarkably handsome, with satin and polish externally and then media blasting inside. This is a really special watch. I'm going to throw it on the wrist real quick. Let me zoom out. Throw it on the wrist real quick, and you can see it is large. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for wrists smaller than 15 centimeters circumference, but it is wearing well on my 16, and you can see that the shape of the lugs in this down the barrel shot really gives you a sense of how it wraps around the wrist rather than flaring out at the edge. There you go. Just so you know, the Quickset is alive and well. Now, jumping to another watch that represents unbelievable value, I see people twisting their hands and furrowing their brows and generally ruining their enjoyment of watches because they can't get some mass-produced steel sports watch from 2.5 luxury watch brands. Whereas for between 10 and 11 grand, you could have a manufacturer caliber, hand-finished, Geneva hallmark landmark watch, and that's exactly what this reference 1860 Chopard Louis Ulysse Chopard is. 36.5 millimeters in yellow gold with a movement designed by Michel Parmigiani for Chopard. This is as good as it gets. Take a look at this dial. An explosive, billowing rose lathe cut. This is no stamped guilloche. This is the real thing, turned reductively on a rose lathe with the center of the dial cut out and those billowing patterns rendered on the center, satin finish outboard, applique yellow gold dart style indices, and faceted dart style Dauphine hands at the center. They're reflective, they're gem-like, they're gorgeous, they're luminous, and the timepiece is graceful. As you can see, the lugs are nicely tapered, relatively thin when viewed head-on, relatively short when viewed in profile. Yellow gold is powerful. It should never be done in oversized proportions or oversized dimensions. This is a watch that disappears under the cuff. And only about 8.6 millimeters thick, it is ultra slim for an automatic winder, and it's a milestone timepiece, a Patek level of engineering and finish from a brand that previously was known mostly for jewelry prior to 1996. Now, throwing this upside down reveals that milestone Parmigiani-designed caliber 196. It is Geneva hallmark, as Chopard, though based in Fleurier, set up a workshop in Geneva specifically to construct these movements. Micro-rotor automatic in cut 22-karat gold. You have a free-sprung balance with an overcoil hairspring beating away at 28.8. 2 stacked mainspring barrels, endowing it with a superior 65-hour power reserve, adjusted like a chronometer in 5 positions. Some versions of this movement, adjusted to the same standards, would even earn chronometer certificates. You can see that the anglage is a mile wide, as I don't have to do anything particular in the light box right here for you to see those mirrored, glinting, rounded bevels. This isn't the machined kind, this is the real deal. There's engine turning on the base plate, perfectly aligned, abrasive wheel laid Côte de Genève, not the stamped kind, the real kind, across the bridges, and every jewel and screw sink is beveled just like the edge of the bridges. This is as good as it gets. And again, guys, you're getting something that is finished to a standard that you won't get even on FP Journe watches priced at $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. This is true hand finishing on the highest level. It's something that only a handful of brands commit to across the board. We're well into the realm of Patek Philippe, of Longa, of Laurent Ferrier. Name the best in the business, and you're getting darn close with this watch. A timepiece, which, as you can see, is even built in a limited series of 1,860 pieces. So there is a lot to love here. A milestone, a landmark, an absolute masterclass, and a combination of both Chopard and Michel Parmigiani, so it even has a connection to independent horology. Truly special, handmade in every regard, inside and out. Let's talk about versatility. Do you want a GMT? How about 100 meters of water resistance? Let's add an alarm and a date. Heck, let's make it in steel and finish it by hand. That's exactly what you get with the Blancpain Revi GMT. Now, the Revi GMT, we'll fire it up. Screw that crown out. You can see it even has an on-off function for the alarm. Even more impressive, this is one of the few alarm watches whose automatic winding system can energize both the alarm barrel and the mainspring barrel, so you don't really need to touch it. It will wind itself in both regards. Now, of course, it does have the ability to set a second time zone independently, as we have a mobile local hour hand and a 24-hour second time dial. So this watch has 2 time zones, and in true GMT fashion, it allows you to look at the second time zone in 24-hour format. The dial is a lovely gloss base with large Arabic numerals and tons of lume. Thanks to the all screw-down crowns, this watch is also 100 meters water resistant. I'm going to push that in. 100 meters water resistant and a high horology sports watch in every regard. What's particularly impressive is that this Blancpain gives you the level of finish you'd expect on a Breguet, because in large part it shares the architecture with Breguet's alarms. And you can see, having just witnessed Geneva hallmark on the Calibre 196 from Chopard, that this is not far removed. The Côte de Genève are in themselves luminous, rich, and gradiated. You can see that the edge of every bridge, as well as the edge of the rotor itself, is mirrored and rounded the old-fashioned way by hand. It genuinely looks manually lavished by the attentions of capable artisans. The striker for the alarm is black polished. The watch, unlike many high horology timepieces, including most Pateks and that Chopard, the movement actually includes hacking seconds. It's adjusted to 5 positions like a chronometer would be, and all of the screws are fired blue. None of these are that sickly, chemically dyed blue color. This is the real thing, and it is absolutely gorgeous, as you do get to see enough of the movement in spite of the winding bridge that you don't feel like you're being shorted the case back. Throw it on the wrist. This is a handmade and hand-finished watch, and this can easily be your daily companion. At 40 millimeters, the size is perfect. It's not too broad across the wrist. At less than 47 millimeters across the wrist, you're getting a watch that's versatile and wearable on a huge range of wrists. So if you're looking for just one watch to get you through life, this is a great option, as it essentially asks nothing, gives up nothing, makes no excuses. Every feature you want, this watch has, including accessibility and a reasonable pre-owned price. Let's check out the lume shot. As you can see, this watch is well loomed, as even the on-off indicator for the alarm is visible. The alarm setting dial is visible. The second time zone is visible. The seconds hand is visible. The power reserve indicator for the alarm is visible. No compromise. That's pretty impressive. And you can see that Blancpain is so much more than the 50 fathoms. And now, I present to you my favorite Patek Philippe, a watch that is uncommonly seen and now discontinued. This is the 5235G, a watch originally launched back in 2011. Deliveries really didn't start in earnest until 2013, because this watch, which incorporates almost all the technologies of the Advanced Research series, proved tougher to build than Patek imagined. It's also the most original and fully realized design effort of the Terry Stern era. Let's start with the basics. This case is angular, sharp, and provocative. It's designed to channel the 3448 perpetual calendar of the 60s, 70s, into early 80s, and it has those sharp, almost Carrera-like angular lugs. There's a break between the satin and the polished elements. You can see it's not thick in profile. It's just over 10 millimeters thick, which is quite reasonable given the complication. There's a little bit of an inward step from the case to the bezel to break up the mass in profile, and then you can see that everything has been thought out, including the vintage-style buckle, which is unique to this model. You can see that vintage Patek Philippe crest, again, a nod to the mid century modern era that inspired the case. The dial, however, is avant-garde. Yes, it's an aperture-style annual calendar, so you have your day, you have your date, you have your month, and they're easy to read, unlike radial pointers, which, frankly, can sometimes be difficult to discern. I don't mean to pick on the Longa here, but I can't at a glance always tell what date it is. Whereas right here, it's big, it's bold, it's easy to see. The printing on the dial is all blue, and that includes the discs themselves for the calendar, which is good taste. The dial also features a number of different silvers. As you can see, the center dial is darker than the minute track outboard, and then the minute track, not just contrasting with the darkness of the center, but you can see that there are sunken registers for the hours and the seconds, and this is a regulator watch with separate hours, minutes, and seconds. It's easier to read than you might think, and at a glance you become used to it quite quickly. Taking a look at the center dial, the striations of the metal, almost like stainless steel, give this timepiece a cool aesthetic, somewhere between technological sheer and I would almost say austerity, as it is a very machine age look that draws you directly into the materials and their textures in a way that most watches don't. It's almost like the stainless steel of a DeLorean. You can see that the Patek Philippe logo here is not printed, it's engraved on the dial. Turn it all over, and this is really the pièce de résistance, a movement built exclusively for the watch. Think of most Patek Philippe watches. They don't have movements built just for that model. It's generally a 215, a 324, or a 240 dropped in, all long-serving movements. Patek developed an all-new movement for this watch. The 31260 is bigger than the 240 micro rotor. It also has a reprofiled set of bridges to echo the pocket watch era with a finger-style train leading into the balance, and it incorporates those advanced research technologies, including a full silicone unlubricated escapement and a silicone hairspring. So the timepiece is designed to operate long-term with high accuracy between services. So optimal performance between services is one of the goals of all the silicone. Another is anti-magnetism with this watch, and it aces that assignment. Unlike many Patek Philippe watches, here we have a true hacking or stop seconds function, and with the annual calendar, you need not adjust the calendar but once per year during the jump from February to March. Lots to love. 40.5 millimeters by just over 10 millimeters thick. The watch wears well. This will be my first Patek Philippe, unless I win the lottery and pick up a 5207P. Frankly, I don't necessarily think that watch even looks better than this one. It's more technically fascinating, but only by a bit. And to get a 5207P, you're going to pay, well, damn close to $500,000. So the watch on my wrist represents something approaching the ultimate, a combination of technical sophistication, style, and deference to history with a wearable size and a versatile aesthetic that could be your dress watch, but is also sports casual enough that you could just wear it around the club or on weekends. I love this watch. Finally, two from Moser. Let's start with the Pioneer center seconds, funky blue with a black steel case. Lots to love. If you remember the Pioneer Tour, then you remember this was the model. The funky blue dial, to be fair, is a combination of funky blue and sort of dark blue, almost navy black. Note that the indices themselves have been blackened, but because of their faceting and their polish, they still have a reflective presence. They don't blend in so much as they provide contrast. The center dial is a lovely cobalt metallic blue that explodes outward and turns black just before it reaches a flange that's fully loomed. The watch is 120 meters water resistant, 42.8 millimeters in diameter, about 51 millimeters lug to lug. Turn it all over, you can see the movement is the HMC 200, 3-day power reserve, automatic winding. It's got a sports watch style architecture with a full balance bridge and a free sprung index. Moser making the escapement, the hairspring, even that variable inertia balance. Very impressive stuff, and it uses a bidirectional magic lever winding system that's more shock tolerant than a standard winding system. 21.6 beat rate, 3-day power reserve, and with plenty of water resistance, this is a timepiece that you could wear full time. It's a viable alternative to something like a Royal Oak Offshore because, frankly, it wears more easily on smaller wrists. It's more comfortable. Frankly, it's also better proportioned in many regards than the Offshore, with a dial that's more memorable and charismatic. Moser would be recognizable even without the marquee on the dial. Erase that logo and everyone still knows who made this watch. That is the ultimate sign of good design. It becomes essentially inseparable from the brand that created it, and that's exactly what Moser has achieved right here. A true sports watch. And you'll note, no date, clean. But if you want to go absolutely barren, it does not get any more so than the black DLC stainless steel 20-piece limited edition Moser Swiss Alp watch Zzz. Why? Well, we all know that the Swiss Alp watch for the last half decade has been a send-up of the Apple Watch, basically taking the look of the Apple Watch and installing traditional Swiss mechanical watchmaking. This dial is designed to effectively poke fun at the sleep dial configuration of an Apple product. All black, 2 hands, no logos, unadorned. Once again, the design quality here is such that you know exactly who made it. Caliber 324 through the reverse side, Caseback power reserve indicator, manual wind 3-day reserve. It has an overcoil hairspring, which is a robust and impressive feature on a basic movement. It's also adjusted in 6 positions, one more than a standard chronometer. So you're getting a truly impressive set of refinements here, right down to the 14-karat gold low friction escapement. And Moser builds that escapement in its precision engineering subsidiary. In fact, Moser builds most of its watches. It likes to say overall its watches are 90% Swiss made or more, which is why they often don't even bother writing Swiss made on the dials of the watch. They don't want to play that rat race. They're not going to run. They're so far above the fray in terms of Swiss content that oftentimes it's only things like straps that are made outside of Switzerland. On the wrist, difficult to describe. It's about 50 millimeters from lug to lug, 10.6 millimeters thick, and 38.5 millimeters across the wrist. It is very comfortable, and it's low enough that you could wear it with a dress cuff. This is a timepiece that has a lot of character, and also there's the fun factor inherent in it. People who are not into watches are going to look at it as an object of fun and curiosity. They'll be asking inquisitive questions, not the usual kind of prying questions you get with a Rolex, like, is it real? How much did it cost? People are going to ask questions, and you're going to have fun answering them. And if you encounter a watch guy who knows what it is, that is a keeper. You've got a new friend for life. A very cool piece and one of 20 made. This is the Swiss Alp watch Zzz. Remember, you see something you like here, reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com. Buy, sell, or trade. Talk to me, guys. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.